The poor girl who humiliated a millionaire at his own wedding. No one could believe it. Hello. Before we start the story, I want to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment telling me. And if you like love stories full of emotion and twists, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way, you help us grow and bring more amazing stories for you to follow. Shall we go together? The city of Charleston, South Carolina was stunning that autumn night. The cobblestone streets, lined with century-old oaks and lit by old-fashioned street lamps, reflected the classic elegance of the American South. In the heart of the city, a grand white mansion with Corinthian columns, huge windows, and impeccably trimmed gardens was hosting the crème de la crème of the local elite. It was the home of the Collins family, owners of one of the largest real estate empires on the East Coast. Inside the mansion, the main hall exuded luxury everywhere. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling over 5 meters high. The walls were decorated with paintings by renowned artists, and a dining table, nearly 10 meters long, displayed white flower arrangements, silver cutlery, and crystal glasses gleaming under the light. The guests, dressed in formal attire, moved about discussing investments, stocks, and trips to exotic destinations. Nathaniel Collins, the heir, was at the center of it all. A 33-year-old man, tall at 6'2", with flawless fair skin, light brown hair, slightly wavy and slicked back, a well-groomed beard and grayish-blue eyes that conveyed coldness and an almost arrogant confidence. He wore a tailored navy blue suit, an Italian silk tie, and a Swiss watch worth more than many luxury cars. Nathaniel greeted investors, smiled at photographers, and at the same time kept a calculating eye on everything, trained from an early age not to fail. To him, that charity event was just another chance for self-promotion, a moment to reinforce his name and impeccable reputation. On the other side of that world of opulence, in the shadows, was Grace Miller, a 27-year-old woman, very fair-skinned with a slight rosy tint, marked by a few delicate freckles on her face. Her red, wavy hair was tied in a simple bun, revealing her neck, and her bright green eyes contrasted with the black and white uniform she wore as a waitress. Her figure was slender, and although her smile was kind, her eyes carried fatigue and worry, the result of sleepless nights and exhausting workdays. Grace walked carefully, carrying a tray, skillfully avoiding the guests. While her mind was far away, she thought of Margaret, her mother, who at that very moment was home alone, fighting a lung disease that worsened every week. The money she would earn that night would be crucial to pay for medicine and the next medical appointment. While replacing champagne glasses on the central table, she heard an elegant male voice, though filled with superiority, right behind her. "Please, Mr. Collins, the McKinley representatives are waiting for your confirmation on the proposal," said one of the assistants. Nathaniel answered without even looking at him. "They can wait. No deal closes without my final word." Grace discreetly lifted her eyes and saw him up close for the first time. His flawless posture, the proud look, and the way people seemed to gravitate around him, as if he were some kind of modern king. But to her, that gaze didn't show happiness, only a huge loneliness disguised as arrogance. As she moved toward the dessert area, one of the event coordinators hurriedly crossed her path. "Grace, be more careful, dear. Those glasses are worth more than your entire salary." The tone of disdain did not go unnoticed. Grace took a deep breath, holding back the urge to reply. "Of course, Ma'am," she answered with a forced smile, hiding the lump forming in her throat. On the other side of the hall, Nathaniel talked with a group of investors, but his gaze wandered, always alert, analyzing people, gestures, intentions. Still, he didn't notice the red-haired girl passing just a few feet away from him. To Nathaniel, she was just part of the scenery, invisible. Another piece in the machine that made that world work without him needing to even look. The clock. It was nearly 9 o'clock when a gust of wind swept through the open glass doors leading to the garden, gently moving the long white linen curtains. Grace, balancing a tray full of glasses, glanced outside for a moment, wishing she were anywhere else but there. Focus, Grace. Just a few more hours, she murmured to herself, holding the tray close to her chest. The hall erupted in laughter, toasts and the clinking of cutlery. But for her, everything felt distant. That was not her life, and it never would be. And as she kept serving unknowingly, her path was already set to cross irreversibly with the man who, until that moment, didn't even know she existed. The background music had lowered. The waiters were quietly collecting empty glasses, crumpled napkins, and plates left on marble tables. The charity dinner was nearing its end, and the guests now spread out in quieter conversations, farewells, and muffled laughter. Nathaniel Collins was leaning against the black marble bar, holding a glass of whiskey, staring at his own reflection in the window. No matter how much he tried to hide it, his clenched jaw gave away his discomfort. His shoulders were tense, and his greyish-blue eyes narrowed, following every word that came from that sharp and familiar voice. "It's unacceptable, Nathaniel. You don't take a stand, you don't defend me, you're not even capable of standing. By me like a decent man should," shouted Charlotte Becker, his fiancée, in front of several curious onlookers. She was 30 years old, slim, tall, with platinum blonde hair perfectly straightened, and blue eyes as cold as the tone she used at that moment. She wore a shiny silver dress that gleamed under the ballroom lights, and held a crystal-encrusted clutch so tightly it looked like she might crush it. Nathaniel took a deep breath, squinted, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Charlotte, this is neither the place nor the time." "You're embarrassing me. The wife of a Collins cannot be treated like just anyone." She raised her voice, even more, crossing her arms. "Either you put these people in their place, or forget about me." Some heads turned. The guests tried to pretend they were looking at the flower arrangements or sipping their drinks, but everyone was paying attention. It was a scandal, and a big one. Nathaniel ran his hand through his hair, clearly at the end of his patience. "Enough, Charlotte! Not today!" He turned his back and hurried down the side hallway that led to the garden, breathing deeply, searching for air, control, anything to keep himself from completely losing composure. But in his rush, he didn't notice an employee coming the other way, carrying a tray full of used coffee cups. The collision was inevitable. One of the cups slipped, tipped over, and the still warm coffee spilled directly onto the young woman's pristine white blouse. Grace gasped, looking down, watching the fabric quickly stain brown. For a second her body froze, and the tray nearly slipped from her hands. Nathaniel, still irritated, looked up, and without really noticing who was in front of him, snapped sharply with a cutting tone. "What the hell? You can't watch where you're going, is that it?" His voice was filled with contempt, as cold as the marble floor. Grace's eyes widened. She took a deep breath, holding back the urge to lower her head like she usually did. But not this time. She was too tired of life, of disdain, of constant humiliation. She slowly raised her chin, meeting his eyes that seemed so confident, so above everything and everyone. But for the first time, those eyes met resistance. "Excuse me," she replied, keeping her tone polite but firm, looking him directly in the eye. "I believe the one who wasn't watching where they were going was you." Nathaniel blinked, surprised. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he saw as just a waitress. "Sorry. What?" He raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms as if she'd said something absurd. "I said the one who bumped into me was you." Grace took a deep breath, holding back the tremor in her voice but staying firm. "And if you'll allow me, a little politeness doesn't hurt anyone, not even those who have everything." For a second there was silence, the kind of silence where even the sound of the wind seems to disappear. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, trying to figure out if this was real. No one, absolutely no one, talked to him like that. Charlotte, who was right behind him, watched the scene, eyes wide, ready to unleash more venom, but she noticed even Nathaniel was speechless. Grace felt a lump in her throat, but didn't give in. She slowly lowered the tray, adjusted her stained blouse, took a deep breath and said in the most controlled voice she could manage, "If you don't mind, I have work to do." And without waiting for an answer, she turned and walked firmly down the hall, leaving Nathaniel standing still, watching her silhouette disappear toward the back kitchen. For a few seconds, he just stood there, staring as if he didn't quite know what had just happened. His hand gripped the whiskey glass so tightly it looked like it might shatter. Charlotte crossed her arms, laughing mockingly. "Pathetic! You can't even control a simple waitress." Nathaniel said nothing, pressing his lips even tighter, but something strange began to stir inside him, something he couldn't name. That look, the way she stared back at him. For the first time, someone had not bowed before him, and at that moment, without knowing it, his life began to slip out of the control he always thought he had. That night, after the charity dinner, Nathaniel returned to his penthouse in downtown Charleston, but unlike usual, he found no comfort in his expensive leather armchair, nor in the aged whiskey slowly sliding down his crystal glass. For the first time in years, his mind was not occupied with business, contracts, or Charlotte's whims. No, he was taken over by something, or rather, someone. The image of that girl, simple, yet with a look full of dignity and courage, wouldn't leave his mind. The way she lifted her chin, how her brown eyes pierced him as if they could see beyond the suit, the last name, and the fortune. It was as if, for the first time, someone didn't see him as a Collins, but just as Nathaniel. He sighed, running his hands through his dark brown hair. "This is ridiculous," he whispered to himself, staring at his own reflection in the large mirror in the room. But no matter how much he tried to convince himself, something inside him was restless. His pride was hurt. And more than that, there was a strange curiosity growing inside him. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. He put on dark jeans, a simple grey sweatshirt, sneakers, and a black cap. Almost no one would recognize him like this. He was practically unrecognizable. He grabbed the keys to one of the least flashy cars in his collection, an ordinary black SUV, and left determined. He drove without thinking much until he realized he was stopped right in front of the small coffee shop where, days before, he had seen Grace working. The light wooden sign with white letters read Morning & Co., and through the large glass windows he could already see the first customers coming in, seeking coffee and a bit of comfort before work. For a few seconds he stayed still inside the car, gripping the steering wheel, questioning himself about what he was actually doing there. "This is insane. What am I doing?" he muttered, looking at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. But before he could convince himself to leave, he saw her appear. Grace. She wore simple jeans, a white t-shirt, and a navy blue apron with the coffee shop's name embroidered on it. Her brown hair was tied up in a messy bun, some loose strands framing her delicate but strong face. She smiled at an older man with grey hair while handing him a coffee and a muffin. That smile was completely different from anything he was used to. It wasn't forced, it wasn't rehearsed like the fake smiles he saw at elite dinners. It was real, and somehow it disarmed him. He took a deep breath, got out of the car, and pushed the glass door, which made a small bell ring at the top. "Good morning, welcome," she said, not looking directly at him since she was focused on another customer's order. Nathaniel felt a tight knot in his chest. Her voice, sweet but confident, echoed inside him in a strange way. He approached the counter, trying to seem as natural as possible. I'd like a cappuccino, and One of those blueberry muffins. Grace looked up to write it down, and for a fraction of a second she seemed to recognize him, but she quickly looked away, focusing on the order. "All right, you can take a seat. I'll bring it to you." He thanked her with a slight nod and chose a table in the corner where he could watch her without being too obvious. With every move she made, the way she dealt with customers, the care she took serving them, her patience even with the rude ones, Nathaniel was breaking down, piece by piece, the idea he had formed of her the first time they crossed paths. No, she wasn't just anyone. And she was definitely not like Charlotte. Within minutes, she came over to the table, placing the cappuccino and muffin gently down. "Here you go. If you need anything else, just call me," she said, keeping her tone polite but clearly distant. "Thank you," he replied, trying to find a crack in her gaze, but Grace was already turning to serve another customer. Nathaniel watched her with his eyes, crossed his arms, and for the first time in a long time, smiled genuinely. A light smile, almost childlike. But alongside it, an uncomfortable certainty began to rise. She was completely different from everything he knew. And that scared him more than he wanted to admit. "Who are you, Grace Miller?" he murmured to himself, bringing the cup to his lips. And little did he know that simple question would be the beginning of something that would change his life forever. In the days that followed, Nathaniel became an almost constant visitor at the small coffee shop, always in disguise, sitting in the same corner, watching, listening, and slowly allowing himself to discover a world that until then seemed not to exist. A world where people smiled genuinely, where conversations were sincere and worries were much more human than numbers and contracts. But while Nathaniel began to lose himself in the quiet sparkle of Grace's eyes, someone was watching everything. From the shadows, Charlotte, always impeccable, with her perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and an expression that alternated between disdain and superiority, she never tolerated losing. And at that moment, the mere possibility of being replaced by a waitress was enough to make her boil with rage. In the living room of her luxurious penthouse, Charlotte paced back and forth, holding her phone while looking out through the huge glass window overlooking Charleston Bay. Her assistant, a tense young woman, tried to keep up with her pace. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Amanda?" Charlotte asked, narrowing her eyes, her voice thick with venom. "Yes, ma'am. He's been there every day this week. He spent hours at the coffee shop, talking to her. I took pictures myself," Amanda replied, swiping through the tablet to show images of Nathaniel sitting in the corner, disguised, staring fixedly at Grace. Charlotte clenched her teeth. "Ridiculous. Pathetic. This will not stand." She sat down on the white leather sofa, crossed her legs and rested her chin on her hand, thoughtful. Her eyes, cold as ice, shone full of malice. Find out everything about her, full name, where she lives, if she owes anything, anything at all. Amanda hesitated. "Ma'am, I already did that." Charlotte raised an eyebrow, interested. "And? She lives with her mother, Margaret Miller. She is very sick, advanced cancer, and they're about to lose the house. The mortgage went to the market. It's about to be auctioned." For a few seconds, Charlotte was silent. Then a cruel smile appeared at the corner of her lips. "Perfect," she whispered. She stood up, grabbed the extremely expensive purse from the table and, walking toward the door, turned to Amanda. "Call my lawyer now. Tell him I want to buy that mortgage, no matter the cost, today." "But, ma'am, that's today, Amanda," she interrupted sharply. Hours later, the paperwork was signed. Charlotte was now, legally, the holder of the debt on Grace and her mother's house, and with that power in her hands, she wasted no time. Late in the afternoon, when Grace arrived home, exhausted after another double shift, she found a luxury black car parked by the gate of the small light blue house. As she approached, she saw the door open, and wearing high heels, dark sunglasses, and a flawless white blazer, Charlotte stepped out, crossing her arms arrogantly. "You must be Grace," she said, slowly removing her sunglasses and sizing her up as if she were something disposable. Grace held the grocery bag tightly in her hands, keeping her posture. "What are you doing here?" Charlotte took a few steps, smiling, until she stood so close that Grace could smell the strong scent of the expensive perfume she wore. "I came to give you a message," she said, extending a black folder. "Here are the documents proving that this house is mine now." Grace's heart raced. "What?" "Oh, yes," she continued, opening the folder and showing the papers. "Your mother owes a lot. And guess what? I bought the debt. That means if I want, you and her are on the street tomorrow." Grace's legs weakened, her hands trembled. Why are you doing this?" Charlotte leaned, looking her in the eyes with a venomous smile. "Because you don't know your place, dear, and your place is not near my fiancé." Grace squinted, her chest rising and falling quickly. "Nathaniel, he's not. I don't—" "Shh," Charlotte interrupted, raising a hand. "I don't care what you think he is. From today you have one option only. Stay away from him, disappear, get out of his life. Otherwise—" She pointed to the simple house behind them. "All this will become rubble." Grace brought her hand to her chest, trying to control her breathing. You can't do this." "I can, and I will. It's your choice, dear," Charlotte said, patting her on the shoulder twice before turning and getting back into the car. "Think carefully. You have until tomorrow." The car sped away, raising dust. Grace stood there, motionless, eyes watering, holding the bag, as if it were the only anchor keeping her from collapsing to the ground. She looked at the house, thought of her mother, thought of everything she had already fought for in life. And right there, at that moment, she realized she was about to face the biggest battle of her life. That night, Grace barely managed to sleep. Her body shook from exhaustion, fear, and helplessness. Charlotte's words echoed in her, mind like knives. She looked at her mother, asleep in the small room, pale, fragile, hooked up to oxygen tubes, fighting the illness that showed no mercy. She had no choice. The next day, she gathered all the courage she had and, taking a deep breath, dressed as simply as possible. A white blouse, worn jeans, and her hair tied back in a casual bun. She walked to the imposing Collins Corporation building, a mirrored skyscraper that seemed to swallow Charleston's sky. The security guards at the door eyed her suspiciously, but she held her ground. "Tell Nathaniel that Grace is here. It's urgent," she said, trying not to show that her hands were sweating cold. Minutes later, she was led up to the 32nd floor. The elevator doors opened, revealing a luxurious space with light marble, modern furniture, and windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Nathaniel was standing near the window, wearing a flawless, dark grey suit, hands in his pockets, staring at the horizon. When he heard her footsteps, he turned around and his light eyes widened when he saw her. "Grace, you're here." His voice was a mix of surprise and hope. She took a deep breath. She knew this would destroy him, but she needed to protect him from himself, and above all, protect her mother. I came to end this," she said, crossing her arms, trying to seem firm. Nathaniel frowned. "End this? What are you talking about?" Grace pressed her lips together, looked away for a second, then met his gaze again, with a coldness that broke her own heart. This joke, this millionaire game you decided to play with the waitress from the corner." His eyes filled with confusion. "What?" "It was fun, Nate." She forced a fake smile, feeling her chest tear from the inside. "But it's over. I'm not interested." Actually, I never was. Nathaniel took a step forward as if trying to figure out if this was real. Stop, that doesn't make sense. Just yesterday Yesterday, I let myself get carried away. I thought I could play rich, have a fairy tale, but I woke up and I realized I don't want that. Her voice faltered, but she tried to hide it. He clenched his fists, eyes watering but trying not to show it. So that's it. You were with me for what? Curiosity? Interest? Are you disappointed I didn't give you a credit card? Those words pierced her heart like blades. But she knew she had to be cruel. Only then would he believe her. She took a deep breath, hardened her gaze even more, and shot back. Wake up, Nathaniel. You're just a spoiled guy. I never wanted anything but to have a little fun. Did you really think a guy like you had a place in my life? For a few seconds, silence took over. His expression changed. Disappointment replaced surprise. So that was it. He ran his hands through his hair, letting out a bitter laugh. I was an idiot. Grace felt tears threatening to fall, but clenched her hands behind her back, digging her nails into her palms to stay strong. If that's what you want, Nathaniel said, walking to the desk and grabbing some papers, trying to look busy, but his voice was trembling. Consider it done. You won't see me ever again. She took a deep breath. That's exactly what I want. She turned and left without looking back. Barely through the door, the tears fell, streaming down her face like rain. Her steps were fast, desperate, as if she wanted to run away from herself. Inside the office, Nathaniel kicked the chair hard, knocking everything to the floor. How could I be such an idiot? He whispered, holding his head in his hands. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Charlotte smiled, flipping through wedding catalogues, choosing flowers, dresses, and tasting expensive wines. Her plan was working perfectly. Finally, she said, looking at her phone screen where there was a photo of her and Nathaniel, he'll be mine, forever. But what Charlotte didn't know was that the consequences of this cruel game were just beginning. The days leading up to the wedding turned into a storm for Nathaniel. Sitting in his office, surrounded by piles of documents and computer screens, he tried to organize his thoughts. The Collins house, all covered in dark wood and decorated with antique furniture that told stories of generations of power, suddenly felt like a cold place, filled with secrets he wasn't ready to face yet. While scanning emails, searching for a financial report for a meeting, a series of messages caught his attention. They were exchanges between Charlotte and a lawyer, full of legal terms indicating an eviction threat against Margaret, Grace's mother. Nathaniel froze. The words mortgage, payment, imminent eviction appeared clearly, accompanied by harsh phrases. She needs to stay away from him, and, if not, we'll take action immediately. His blood ran cold. Wasting no time, Nathaniel grabbed his phone and called his father, Richard Collins, a man in his early 60s, face marked by time, grey hair always neatly combed, and stern eyes that seemed to analyze every move like a ruthless judge. He answered in the office of the Collins mansion, surrounded by portraits of ancestors and trophies symbolizing the family legacy. "Dad, I need to talk to you, now." Nathaniel's voice was tense, almost like a trapped scream. Richard sighed, knowing he couldn't avoid the truth much longer. "What is it, Nate?" "I saw the emails. You knew what Charlotte did to Grace. You knew she bought her mother's mortgage just to keep her away from me." Nathaniel's anger mixed with deep disappointment. Richard stared at his son with a hard, almost emotionless expression. "Nathaniel, you need to understand something. Charlotte is the perfect match for the Collins family. She has the right bloodline, the right upbringing, and she understands how business works. That's the reality. The truth is, we need to maintain the family's prestige, no matter the cost." "Cost what?" Nathaniel almost shouted, feeling his world collapse. "Are you saying you'd rather protect a shallow, manipulative woman than my mother, or even me?" Richard looked away, as if the weight of the decision had marked his soul. "It's not that simple, son. You know business is about sacrifices. You're the heir, and you have responsibilities bigger than your heart can understand right now." Silence fell between them, heavy and painful. Nathaniel felt a lump in his throat, tears threatening to fall, but he swallowed them hard. "I won't allow this, Dad. I won't marry Charlotte, not like this, knowing everything is a dirty game, and I'll find a way to protect Grace, no matter the cost." "Be careful what you wish for, Nate. This could ruin everything." His father's voice was a cold warning, almost threatening. Nathaniel hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that now seemed smaller, colder. He knew he was in the middle of a war that went beyond his broken heart. It was a fight for justice, for love, for truth. And the battle was just beginning. The big day finally arrived. The Collins Mansion's ballroom had been transformed into a spectacle of luxury and extravagance, with crystal chandeliers shining brightly, carefully arranged white and gold flowers, and Charleston's high society guests, powerful businessmen, influential politicians, and traditional families, all dressed in their finest clothes, eager for what seemed like the wedding of the year. Charlotte, flawless in her white satin dress, walked down the aisle with a victorious smile on her face. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup impeccable, she looked like the embodiment of perfection and power, confident that this moment would forever seal her place in the Collins family. Her eyes shone not only with happiness, but with an almost cruel pride. At the altar, Nathaniel wore a black tuxedo, his face serious, his gaze heavy with a mix of determination and pain. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight of expectations and falsehood surrounding him. With every step Charlotte took, his heart tightened, but a greater strength pushed him to do what he knew was the truth. The judge began the ceremony, and the first formal words were spoken. Just as Charlotte was about to say, "I do," Nathaniel raised his hand, asking to speak. An uncomfortable silence fell over the guests. All eyes turned to him, surprised and curious. "Before we continue," his voice was firm, filled with restrained emotion, "I need to tell the truth, not only to you here, but to myself." Charlotte frowned, her smile slowly fading, her eyes glaring at Nathaniel. For many, this wedding represents the perfect dream, the union of two families and the future of an empire. But the truth behind this altar is very different. He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Charlotte used blackmail to keep an innocent woman out of my life, a woman who, unlike the bride here, is genuine, brave, and worthy of respect. Grace Miller is not just a waitress at a cafe. She is the daughter of a woman who is about to lose the roof over her head because Charlotte bought her mother's mortgage and threatened to evict them." A murmur of shock ran through the room. Some guests exchanged incredulous looks, others whispered, already sensing they were witnessing a bombshell revelation. "Did you know this, Dad?" Nathaniel looked at Richard Collins, whose expression hardened, and for a moment everyone felt the weight of that coldness. "Yes, I knew, and I supported it because that's how we make sure everything stays the way it's always been, that appearances are maintained and personal interests prevail above all else." Richard's voice was like a harsh blow, cutting. Through the silence, Charlotte tried to interrupt, but Nathaniel raised his hand again. "It's not over. I refuse to live a lie. I refuse to be stuck in a commitment that has no love or respect. This marriage ends here, and from today on, I'm going to fight to fix the mistakes of the past, for me, for Grace, and for those who truly deserve it." Tears began to run down Grace's face, who was among the guests, watching in secret, her eyes shining with emotion and hope. Charlotte was left speechless, defeated in front of everyone. The hall, once filled with pomp and formality, now turned into a stage for justice, truth, and redemption. Nathaniel stepped down from the altar, walking toward Grace as the crowd parted before him, and there, among surprised looks and whispers, a new chapter began to be written. While the hall still echoed with the impact of Nathaniel's words, a murmur started to grow among the guests. Suddenly, the doors to the hall opened, and with steady steps, Grace Miller entered. She wasn't dressed for a wedding. Her simple waitress uniform identified her immediately. The white apron, plain black shirt, hair tied in a modest bun. Silence took over the room. All eyes turned to her, some full of surprise, others disbelief. Grace walked slowly through the guests, collecting trays, still in the hands of waiters, but never taking her eyes off the scene at the altar. Her delicate face showed clear signs of fatigue and suffering, but her posture was unshakable, a rare mix of dignity and courage. Nathaniel watched her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and guilt. Charlotte, still trying to regain control of the situation, frowned, realizing that this woman, whom she had underestimated so many times, was about to turn the game completely. When Grace reached the stage, she took the microphone still in Nathaniel's hand, who kindly stepped aside to give her space. The room fell completely silent, everyone waiting for what this humble girl, until then invisible to the elite, had to say. Her voice was a bit shaky at first, but gained strength with every word, reaching deep into the hearts of those listening. I could be anywhere else today. I could be trying to forget the burden of bills or worrying about my mother's health, which depends on what I earn every day. But here I am, because I believe dignity can't be bought with money, and character isn't lost, even when we're looked down on. She paused, looking directly at Charlotte, then at Nathaniel's father and everyone present. Many here value appearance, status, what can be shown to the world. But true wealth is inside us. It's in how we treat others, in the honesty with which we face our battles, in the courage to be who we really are. I didn't come to humiliate anyone, nor to be humiliated. I came to remind you that self-respect and integrity are the foundation of everything. The hall remained in absolute silence. No one dared interrupt the young woman who, without harsh words or direct accusations, had shattered the entire false facade of the event. Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. He had never seen Grace like this, so strong, so inspiring. And at that moment he realized that everything he had been through until then had not been in vain. Charlotte lowered her head, defeated. The arrogance that once dominated her seemed gone, replaced by an expression of helplessness. Grace handed the microphone back to Nathaniel and, with a slight sad smile, returned to her work, collecting the last trays, while a sea of eyes followed each of her steps. That triumphant entrance not only surprised everyone, but forever changed the fate of that night. After the silence that settled in the hall with Grace's speech, Nathaniel felt intense confusion in his chest. Every word the young woman said echoed in his mind, as if awakening something dormant inside him, something he had never before had the courage to acknowledge. He looked at Charlotte, who now seemed fragile and defeated, her mask of arrogance completely shattered. It was then that Nathaniel made a decision that would change his life forever. In a private room in the Collins mansion, away from curious eyes, he confronted Charlotte. The bride, still dressed in her luxurious gown, looked at him with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Nathaniel, you can't do this. What will people think? Our union is the family's future," she begged, trying to keep control. He answered with a firm voice but full of emotion. "Charlotte, for a long time I lived trapped by expectations that aren't mine, but I can't be a puppet anymore. I don't want this marriage anymore, not with you and not the way my father wants." The tension between them was palpable. Charlotte defeated, turned her back and left without saying another word. Nathaniel then faced his father, Richard Collins, the strict patriarch who had always ruled his life with an iron hand. The man, with a severe and imposing look, seemed to be expecting this moment, but Nathaniel didn't back down. "Dad, I can't follow this path anymore. I won't sacrifice my heart and my freedom to preserve a name that means nothing if there's no truth behind it." Richard crossed his arms, a slight cold smile on his lips. "You're making a mistake, my son. The family, the empire, the business, it all depends on you keeping up appearances. Charlotte is the right partner for that." But Nathaniel replied with conviction, "Not for me. I choose a different path. I choose to be true to myself and to seek what really matters." Without wasting time, he left the mansion and ran to the cafe where Grace worked. His heart raced, mixing fear and hope. When he entered, he found Grace cleaning tables, her face tired but still radiating an inner strength that attracted him more than any luxury or party. He approached, looking into her eyes with sincerity and humility. "Grace, I know I hurt you, and I have no excuses, but I need to try again. I want to learn to be a different man, someone who deserves to be by your side." Grace hesitated, surprised by this new attitude. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "Nathaniel, if you really want to change, you'll have to prove it. Not with words, but with actions." He nodded, determined. "I'll prove it, and I won't give up no matter what happens." The cafe seemed small compared to the great transformation that was starting there. Nathaniel was ready to leave behind everything he had learned to build a new life with grace and beside the truth. The afternoon sun bathed the small park in a golden, soft, almost magical light. There, among centuries-old trees and wooden benches worn by time, Nathaniel and Grace prepared for the most important moment of their lives. A simple wedding, without luxury, but full of meaning. Nathaniel, now with a serene expression and eyes reflecting new maturity, wore a white linen shirt and light dress pants. His smile did not hide the pride he felt for all he had achieved, but especially for who he had become. Grace, radiant, wore a light cotton dress, simple, with her hair loose, flowing in the breeze. Her face showed the happiness of someone who had finally reached her dream, finishing nursing school, a security she never had before. Close friends, some volunteers from the NGO Nathaniel had created for affordable housing, were there to celebrate. The atmosphere was warm, full of laughter, tears, and hope. When the ceremony began, Nathaniel held Grace's hands and said, with a firm and emotional voice, "Grace, you taught me that the true value of life isn't in what we own, but in who we are and the love we share. With you, I learned that money can buy luxury, but never character, love, and dignity." Grace smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Nathaniel, together we learned that our strength is in honesty, in the courage to change, and in the ability to truly love. We don't need a castle to be happy. Our home is where our hearts find peace." The wedding was simple, without pomp, but full of meaning. Among tight hugs and sincere promises, that union represented a victory over adversity and the masks they both had to tear down. Later, in an intimate conversation, Nathaniel confided to Grace, "I sold part of the family business to fund the NGO. I want our story to help others have a better future. I don't want anyone to go through what you and your mother went through." Grace gently held his face and replied, "You're building a true legacy, a legacy of hope and love. And I will be by your side, always." In that park under the open sky, their lives took a new step. Without material riches, but with a greater wealth, dignity earned, sincere love, and the certainty that in the end, the greatest lesson was that phrase now echoing in their hearts. And for everyone who witnessed their transformation, money Buys luxury, but it will never buy character, love, and dignity. So what did you think of this story? I really want to know your opinion. Leave a rating from 0 to 10. Tell me what touched you the most and how you felt during the story. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new updates. Before you go, I've already prepared another moving story that will touch your heart even more. Stay tuned.